Key stakeholders are being trained in matters of CSME. The Companies and Intellectual Property Office to host a national seminar on copyrights, and GIS Dominica 2015 officially opened. Thank you for joining us on another edition of National Focus. I'm Jarna Hector.
And I'm Tasia Floissac. Stay with us for details of the headline stories and others after this.
Think water, think life. Water refreshes, restores, cleans, and enhances growth. Potable water is a benchmark for development. DOWASCO is serious about its mandate to ensure easy access to potable water island-wide and provide sewage services for a cleaner environment. DOWASCO is your water and sewage company.
Thank you for staying with us. Dominica has been chosen to implement the first pilot program to test a tourism waste management destination tool. This is all in an effort to better market the destination and bring more visitors to the island. The project, which is being spearheaded by Sustainable Travel International, as well as Royal Caribbean Cruises, the Organization of American States, and the Caribbean Tourism Organization, is designed to improve the way Dominica manages its tourism-related services. Director of Tourism Colin Piper explains what the project will entail.
7 countries have been earmarked to participate in the initial phases, and Dominica is in fact one of them. And so we know that tourism brings about many economic opportunities for citizens of a country, but it also presents challenges. And so this multi-sectoral approach is being implemented so that our small island developing states like Dominica can become global leaders in the whole sustainability approach to managing tourism on their destination. As you know, the Caribbean is one of the most dependent regions for tourism, and so it makes sense that that we would be a part of this.
Sustainable Travel International, which is the world's leading organization working to harness the power of travel and tourism, is on island and is implementing a number of projects towards that goal.
We're now into part 2, which is where they're trying to come up with an action agenda of 3 to 4 projects that we can undertake that would make a difference in terms of how we manage the destination and the benefits that we realize from the initiative. So as a result of all of this, now having the evaluation done, utilizing the tool, coming up with the action agenda, we'll also be able to do some online educational training and then use the tools basically to monitor, to measure, and to determine whether in fact we've been successful. Along the way, we're gathering information on camera, so we're going to be telling the story, so to speak, of how Dominica is doing, and so a number of private sector and public sector initiatives have been chronicled in terms of video, and these are all part of telling the story.
Dominicans, and in particular those involved in creating films and music, including producers, authors, musicians and photographers, are getting the chance to learn more about copyrights. A national seminar is being hosted by the Companies and Intellectual Property Office in collaboration with the World Intellectual Property Organization on January 29th and 30th. The seminar will educate the users and owners of copyrights about their legal rights under the Copyrights Act of Dominica and Dominica's international obligation to protect copyrights. Registrar at the Companies and Intellectual Property Office, Sandra Julian, explains copyrights.
Copyright is a legal right which exists in the copy of any work, original work, any artistic, scientific or cultural works. A copyright exists as the right of the owner to authorize copies of his work.
The seminar will focus on the nature of copyright and related rights, copyright and related rights in Dominica, and enforcement of copyright, among others.
Sometimes people use people's work indiscriminately without getting the authority to use their works. So people have to know that those works are protected under the law and they need to get the authority of the owners to use those works.
The organization responsible for copyrights in Dominica and the Caribbean is the Eastern Caribbean Copyright Organization, ECCO. The seminar will also assist the business community and policy makers in the area of economic development and trade, particularly trade in services. The seminar begins at 8:30 on Thursday, January 29th at the Jnauary Hotel.
While it's true that Carnival is not just a Dominican thing, it's also true that no island does it quite like Dominica. After all, c'est la vie nous. This is what the streets of the capital looked like this past Saturday when Mas Dominic 2015 was officially unveiled. This is merely a sample of the spectacle that is Dominica's Carnival. A parade of costumes, bands and floats, each telling a story of a rich history while marching to the rhythms of Dominica's homegrown bouyon music. Darkies, stilt walkers and revelers in sensei costumes had their place in the streets alongside pageant beauties and royalty. The 7 Miss Dominica contestants, the Miss Teen Dominica contestants, the Carnival Princess contestants, and Carnival Mother's Queen contestants, each in their unique floats, sometimes waving, sometimes moving to the sound of Lapu Cabrit. The parade is a melange of young and old, local and visiting, spectators and revelers, from government ministers to students and everyone in between, all people coming out to celebrate a life that is uniquely Dominican. Honorable Ian Douglas, representing the Minister for Tourism, put it best this way.
I cannot think of a better phrase which represents our distinct carnival celebration. In Dominica, we are very fortunate to have a very unique culture, a very unique and special way of life, a very unique carnival celebration which displays our rich culture and our ancestral heritage, which is evident and which was very evident on the streets of Roseau today. I want to take a moment also to congratulate all of you all and all those who work so hard year in, year out to put this wonderful celebration together.
About this year's ingenious theme, C'est la vie nous, Mayor of Roseau, Her Worship Irene John, had this to say.
It's a true reflection of what carnival celebrations mean to us in Dominica. We all look forward to that time of year where we can display expressions of our culture. Therefore, as Mas Dominic 2015 unfolds, let us come together and enjoy ourselves in a very responsible manner.
At the opening ceremony of Mas Dominic 2015, the Ministry of Culture was represented by Acting Chief Cultural Officer Jacinta David. Until February 16th and 17th, which is only 3 weeks away, enthusiasts can look forward to a melting pot of carnival activities, including pageants, calypso shows, community carnival launchings, duives, pan in the city, and so much more.
CARICOM, in partnership with the Ministry of Trade, is working to create more awareness among even more stakeholders as it relates to the CARICOM single market and economy. This drive to create awareness about CSME is one component of the CARICOM Trade and Competitiveness Project. Several workshops have been held across the region in this regard, and specific stakeholder groups have been targeted. Beginning today, January 26, a training and sensitization workshop convened under this component, Component 300. Barbara Jacob Small is a consultant for this program. She revealed the objective of Component 300.
Is coming out of these activities, we will have a wider, a more effective, a more efficient flow of information, because one of the problems that CARICOM nationals have always cited with the CSM is that they don't know what's happening. They don't have information. You know, one of the things that's important when you're implementing something like the CSM is to be able to do research, measurement, and evaluation. So you find because of that kind of information flow intervention, it'll be much easier to do that kind of research and to track the impact, the economic impact of the CSM. So I think perhaps the greater focus would be what can we expect to happen? Because the CSM, the CSME, is one of the landmark development undertakings in the history of the Caribbean.
Jacob Small gave a brief recap of the previous components.
Under Component 100, the focus was to bring the legislative environment, the policy environment, all of that whole infrastructure in place. Under Component 200, the focus was then to make sure that issues to do with licensing, issues to do with accreditation and certification across the space are relatively harmonized, that there is mutual recognition, you know, of certification and accreditation. So under Component 300, which is where we are, improving information flows in the CSM, the focus is to make sure that the human resource, the people who are administering these processes, these arrangements, these administrative things, they are on the same page. They are speaking the same language, they are doing the same thing. They are sharing information, they are able to talk to each other with ICT, with the support of ICT. Streamlined ICT that enables one agency to be able to speak to the other, to be able to share information.
Okay, so Jarna, looking at this story, I think first it's important to understand what the CARICOM single market and economy really is. So for those of you who may not know, the CARICOM single market and economy is basically a single large market and economic space that includes 15 nations, 15 Caribbean countries, as opposed to having 15 small islands with their own individual market and economy. So basically, if you have this large market or economy, I personally think it would be better to negotiate with other regional groupings as one body, as one individual, and a lot more can get done.
Well, Tasia, it's not just you who think that this is a good idea, that it will be better. That is the general idea, that it will be better for each member state, and especially for small states and small economies like Dominica's. One of the components of the CSME, which is actually working, there's a green light on it, is free movement of people.
Okay, exactly. And right now, basically from this story, we understand that they're also trying to implement the free movement of information, which I think ties into the free movement of people. Because if you think about it, for example, let's say you're a traveler, you're an artist, and you have to leave Dominica, or you're from another country and you come into Dominica, it's better and it will be easy for your information to be accessible in someone else's country. So you, Jarna, you won't have to provide like proof of any kind of documentation or proof of work for you to be able to live or do business in that country. So the information is going to help the free movement of people.
Important to say, Tasia, that information will be available to the relevant authorities.
Exactly. Like today, I think they had the police force and other members of government, well, not just government, but stakeholders on this project. And as far as I understand, it's going to be implemented in 6 countries. That's Dominica, Belize, St. Vincent, Jamaica, and I'm not sure, let me see here, Grenada and Guyana.
Right. What that means for skilled people, that would be university graduates, sports people, artists, journalists, musicians, is that you can travel to another member of CARICOM, another CARICOM member state for work as long as you're seeking employment, and you will not need a work permit, and you will not be told how long you're allowed to stay. As long as it's for work, you're seeking employment, then it will be like home for you.
Exactly. So I know some countries say, you know, you can only stay 6 months or less than a year, but within the CARICOM, you won't have to do that.
Another important part of that, when you're talking about employment and moving skills around, you need to talk about income protection. Definitely. And that brings to mind CARICOM agreement on Social Security. It took effect in 1997. That means that when you work in another country, as long as you pay your Social Security contributions, you can get your pension at home or wherever you retire. Like all your contributions come together. If you work in 10 different countries, they all come together to make sure that you can have a pension or grant or whatever you qualify for.
I actually did not know that.
That's good.
That's good. So basically, it helps free movement of people, free movement of trade, free movement of travel, and free movement of information. So right now, GIS is going to take a look into the history of Carnival.
For many today, Carnival has become a much anticipated event, the dates of which are plotted on the calendar as a to-do activity for the year. Those living in the diaspora see it as an opportune time to come home to unwind. But where really did this festivity originate? According to local historian Lennox Honeychurch's publication, History of Carnival, this festivity had two main influences. The first was Roman Catholicism. The word itself originates from the Latin phrase carnem levare, meaning to put away meat. It also stems from the Italian word carnevale, carnis, the Latin for flesh, also implied not just the meat of animals, but the sensual ways of the flesh as well. By the Middle Ages, the popular street carnival had become firmly part of European folk culture. It was a time for disguised street bands, elaborate masks, bawdy songs, performing plays, acrobats, ridicule, and so on. The second influence is from West Africa. Honeychurch's publication says, quote, "In Dominica, the traces of African influence in traditional masquerade were obvious in the type of songs, the instruments, the tone and tempo of music. The street performances of revelers were among the clearest links between the street bands of Roseau and Portsmouth and dusty village centers along the Guinea coast." End of quote. As for the festivity itself, the publication describes a time in Dominica when slaves were prohibited from gathering in public places. However, when the abolition of slavery took effect, 14,175 slaves in Dominica were freed. As in other islands, the liberated people came out onto the streets. The proclamation was read with the roll of drums from the steps of the courthouse on Victoria Street. From Soufriere to Maho to St. Joseph, dressed in their Sunday best, they streamed into the city. Mass was celebrated in churches island-wide, and by midday the various forms of taboo drums, the long boom booms, and rattling shak-shaks were echoing down the streets. No written permission or free papers were needed now. Street masquerade had come to stay. And that's the English news. McPherson St. Luce is up next with the Creole highlights.
Allô tout le monde, bienvenue à cette nouvelle en créole. Non, moi, c'est McPherson St. Louis. Premièrement, un workshop qui a sensibilisé plusieurs départements en Dominique à ce carré comme single market en économie, qui prend place en Dominique semaine cela. Un consultant Saint-Lucie Barbara Small qui a facilité le workshop là.
L'année à yoga créé carré comme. Nous attendons à chaque des pays Caraïbes là à venir ensemble pour operate CARICOM. CARICOM veut dire CARICOM single market. Ça veut dire ça c'est une place, ça pas juste Dominique et Saint-Lucie et Jamaïque et Guyane, ça c'est une market, une place. Et pour ça fait, pour nous c'est genre CARICOM là, c'est peuple là qui sortir ces diverses places là à CARICOM. Nous supposons sentir qu'on nous a comme si nous c'est yon gens, yon moun. Pour ça fait nous ni pour ni confiance là that les nous quitter si ou quitter Dominique pour aller Trinidad pour chercher travail, Labor Department pas qu'à track ou down, police pas qu'à courir tout bail en ordre pour ça à trois market ça à Trinidad et chercher travail. So, ça, CARICOM qu'a fait, c'est mettre bagay en place pour ça fait. You can mettre ces legislation, tout legal aspects là, mettre ça en place. You can faire assurance that customs of Jamaïque, customs of Trinidad, customs of Dominique, toutes ces places là, qu'a fait travail de même manière. So, Ça qui a fait programme ça là, c'est la hani un projet pour assister toutes ces agences gouvernement pour mettre système en place pour faire travail de même manière across CARICOM.
On a nouvelle avec à concerner consumer protection, ça c'est ça fait commodité moun ka potiwe assez la place là, ça ka aussi voir attention pour CARICOM single market and economy. Parole ça là sur le directeur commodité Marfan Walter.
Adida ministre trade olo moun ka kouye avec yo ka di ki yo ni petit problème là yo gagner bagay. Dans ces supermarkets là, dans ces petits shops là. Parce que y a des bagages yo gagné avec là yo mettez ou là yo ka servi, yo ka taper problème. Parce que c'est pas cause ça la yon à CARICOM aussi nous ni treaty là, provision qui ka parler contre consumer protection. Dominique n'est pour faire manœuvre pour assurer que il ka marcher qu'on treaty là qu'a dit pour marcher. So nous taper en copie harmonize act là, legislation là, hot CARICOM. Nous faisons manœuvre nous travailler avec legal affairs avec Pearl Xavier avec ika tweakly pour certainté uniqueness à Dominique. C'est à dire dans document ça là. Nous faisons bon mouvement à ça. Mais ça nous voulons faire, c'est pour protect les gens qui ont gagné bagay. On dit dans ces supermarkets là, on dit dans march là, on dit dans ces petits shops là. So you need un recourse, you need un remedy si bagay pas aller bon avec you. So ça c'est ça la legislation là en écoute.
En la nouvelle, ministre santé Dominique Wezivwe Bagay Medical Organisation l'Amérique Voche semaine passée. Chef officier médical Dr. David Johnson, recevait ces bagailles médicales là à ce compte ministre santé et puis il remercie l'organisation là pour contribution ailleurs. $25,000 valait bagaille en parmi bagaille pour traiter yeux formés par consignment là. Ministre santé Honorable Dr. Kenneth Darrow fait parole contribution qui autant significant qui Voche continue qu'a fait par Dominique. Ministère aussi remercie Voche pour contribution à eux. Et puis finalement, même parlement Kalinago Honorable Cassius Darrow visité le projet Horseback Ridge en territoire Kalinago. Je mets ça là autant important pour le développement Kalinago.
Nous ne faisons pas monter Horseback Ridge, ça c'est chimère qu'on a monté par Kankad, qui a généré chimère qui a sorti de la station police en Pointe. A monté par les Pakakad, ça c'est un morceau chimique qui est très important parce que nous avons le monde, les femmes qui ont fait des produits agricoles. Et bien, si nous avons mangé morceau chimique, ça qui a élevé nos manières parce que nous n'avons plus accès pour chimère à monter pour nous cultiver et planter plus. Et bien aussi, ce n'est pas un affaire agriculture tout seul, mais nous avons tapé même les gens qui travaillent dans l'industrie touriste. Parce que yo kay vini, yo ka monter là pour faire ça nous dit sightseeing. So c'est là moun ka traverser tout le temps et qui bénéficie en le monde en territoire Caraïbe là.
Messieurs, mesdames, ça c'est toute bonne nouvelle en créole pour à présent. Non moins c'est McPherson St. Luce. Au revoir.
Coming up next, are you a sugar addict? Take the test next.
If you can believe this.
Come by my house and let me show you some movies.
Why can't you believe this? Some mothers don't believe their own children when they say they've been sexually abused, and they don't report it. Remember, if anyone asks to see or touch their private parts, touches them inappropriately, shows them or forces them to touch one's private parts, has sex with them, shows them pornographic material, or deliberately lets them hear or see the act of sex, then it is sexual abuse. Believe your child and report the sexual abuse. For more information about child abuse, contact these agencies. This message brought to you by UNICEF and this station.
Do you feel like you absolutely need to have sweets at every meal and maybe in between? Would you say you have a sweet tooth? What is casually referred to as a sweet tooth is actually an addiction to sugar, and like any addiction, you need to break it. Too much of anything, no matter how delicious, is bad. Studies show after eating a sugary treat, the brain releases natural chemicals called opioids, which give the body a feeling of intense pleasure.
The brain then recognizes this feeling and begins to crave more of it. Researchers have identified that there are certain areas in the brain that are activated when one craves sugar. There is also scientific evidence that shows that these same areas of the brain are activated when drug addicts crave drugs, which proves how real a sugar addiction can be. For tips on breaking your sugar addiction, keep watching National Focus.
And that's all for this edition of National Focus. We always welcome your suggestions and comments. Drop us an email at gis@dominica.gov.dm or visit our website news.gov.dm.
Like our Facebook page, facebook.com/GIS News Dominica, and follow our Twitter at GIS Dominica. You can also catch up on past National Focus newscasts on our GIS Dominica YouTube channel. From all of us here on the GIS News Desk, I'm Jarna Hector.
And I'm Tasia Floissac. Thanks for watching and join us again next time on National Focus.